Hello, this is your Unit 2 recap video just before the exam tomorrow. I thought it'd be important to go through a few aspects of Unit 2 that you may have forgotten, or just some things that we know because of the advanced information. So, first things first, things we know for Unit 2. The advanced information has told us that you will have a comparison question on this paper. So it's best to check over your comparison question structures and especially your golden rules to ensure that you know how to tackle these kinds of questions. 2, as with every single Unit 2 paper, you will have an editing section. Now, this has always traditionally been 5 marks, so I expect it to still stay 5 marks. Every single paper it's been 5 marks, and that will obviously add on to the 35 marks that you get for the other part of the writing section. And finally, you will have a choice of a 35-mark question, just as with all Unit 2 papers. And that will usually be a choice between a description, a narrative, or an essay or / exposition. Now, only 2 of them will appear, meaning that you need to revise all 3 just in case there is a question you don't like or you'd rather answer a specific type of question, and so on and so forth. Things we don't know. We don't know what other high tariff questions are going to be on the paper. You'll probably see another 5 marker or so, but you'll probably also get a second 10 marker, or in some cases they've done 8 markers. Now that could be a how question, it could be a what impressions question. There've been several questions that have come up in the past. We've had duplicates, we've had 2 what questions on the same paper, and so on and so forth. So just make sure that you revise all of the different types. If I'm being honest, it's very unlikely that they'll include synthesis and comparison on the same paper. Doesn't mean they won't. They haven't done it in the past, but it doesn't mean they won't do that. So it's more likely that you'll find synthesis on the next paper, which is Unit 3. Again, for number 2 there, the choice of writing, we don't know what 35 markers could come up. There will always be a choice, but there will always be one missing. There have been years where there's been expositions and descriptions and expositions and narrative, and there's been years where there's been a narrative and a description. You can't rely on the fact that they're going to do a 35-mark essay question just for you. And finally, we don't know if they're going to throw in any odd markers. That means marks that are outside of the 5 to 10 bracket. Now, we used to teach this spec as being you'll get a 5 marker, you'll get a 10 marker, and so on. But over the last couple of years, they've thrown in 4 markers, 6 markers, 8 markers, and so on. So just be prepared. If you see a question with a high number of marks, still follow the same structure for the question. Don't change it just because it's got less marks or more marks. Okay, so what I thought I'd go over is a comparison recap for any of you who haven't done comparison questions in a while or are struggling with them. So we're going to look at this question. Compare what the writers say about the impacts of violent media on young children. The first thing I would do when tackling a comparison question is to highlight the key parts of the question. And in this case, it would be compare, so I know it's a comparison question, the impacts of violent media on young children, and then 10 marks. So then you start to plan your comparison step by step. First of all, read the first text, so in this case text A, and highlight at least 5 relevant quotes. Step 2, read the second text, in this case text B, and highlight at least 5 relevant quotes, and keep the previous text in the back of your mind whilst you do this. 3, number match your quotes by topic. Which quotes discuss the same or opposite ideas in each text? And a demonstration of that comes here. So how to number match. So if we picked out here, we should limit exposure to violent acts for the best interest of our children, and explosive entertainment should be a family affair. Both of these quotes discuss whether we should expose or limit our children to violent media. They are differing views on the same topic. So you can number match them on my sheet by calling them both 1. And so I've marked them both as 1 here because I'm going to match them together. The same way as these 2 would be 2. And then that would be a good example of how you start to do it. Remember, you need to do this 5 times. Then that way you'll have 10 quotes in total. 5 from text A, 5 from text B. Now, sometimes they will give you 3 texts for a comparison. In that case, you pick 3 to 4 points per one. Then think, do the texts agree or disagree? Do they outline similarities, differences, or both? And then answer the question using this structure. Give an overview of the comparison you're about to make. Then start with whatever text it is first, with a quote, and tell me what it suggests. So use your inference skills. Then, similarly, slash however, or on the other hand, etc. The second text, insert the quote, and then use your inference to analyze it. So as an example, this would be the one that I did for the first one. The texts disagree on whether we should let children watch violent media. That red bit is my overview, giving me a brief overview of what my comparison will be about. Sometimes you can pick up overview marks in these questions, so please do include that. Then I've talked about text A stating, we should limit exposure to violent acts for the best interests of our children. This suggests that violent media can have a negative impact on children and they should be protected from it. On the other hand, text B states explosive entertainment should be a family affair. This disagrees with text A, implying that violence is safe enough to be enjoyed and encouraged by the whole family. Notice how I've used my blue inference skills to say what this tells me about the point I'm making. I've used in bold there a comparative sentence to link the two comparisons together, and then I've constantly referred to whether they're different or whether they're similar. So that is exactly how you go through a comparison question. Like I said, number method, then use the structure to answer it. Okay, in terms of writing then, this is the mark scheme for 35 mark writing questions. I'm just going to focus on the top band at the moment, okay, because every other band is very similar to it. It's just with reduced language. So for example, good, some, wide range, and so on. Okay, so first of all, in content, this is worth the most marks. It's worth 20 marks. That doesn't mean you neglect accuracy. That is just as important, if not more important in the grand scheme of things. If they can't read what you're saying, there's no point in having amazing content. So look what it says, mature and perceptive writing. Okay, so what that means is keep your head screwed on while you're writing this. Don't go off on a tangent. Don't jump all over the place. Make sure that you are coherent and you're mature with your response. That goes for narratives and descriptions as well. Don't go too left field with it. Don't go for some kind of fantasy element, because it's not going to pick you the marks up and examiners don't like it very much. 2, sustained and effective writing with techniques that fully engage the reader's interests. That means using your devices. Things like metaphors, similes, and so on should be used constantly, but do not shoehorn them in. What I mean by that is use your writing techniques, but don't just pile them in for the sake of it. Only when they're relevant and they will add something to your writing. Don't just chuck in repetition for the sake of it. Appropriate register is confidently adapted to your purpose and audience. Whatever your audience is going to be for your writing piece, make sure that your writing sort of reacts to that. What I mean is, if they ask you to write something for a teen magazine or a lively teen magazine, that's more likely on unit 3, but just for the idea's sake, let's go for it on unit 2, then you need to make sure that your writing is approachable for that kind of audience. In the same way, if you're writing an essay, it should be very formal. If you're writing a narrative or a descriptive piece, they won't tell you what audience it is, but you are retelling something, usually something from your life in the case of an account, or you're describing something that you're meant to be able to visualize. So you use your appropriate register for that. Make sure you aren't throwing slang around just for the sake of it. That also comes under writing accurately. Ideas are convincingly developed with detail, originality, and creativity. That means if you're aiming for the top bandings, you need to have original ideas. You aren't just copying directly what the texts say. Because remember, this writing section is going to be related to whatever the paper was on. You need to be creative in the way that you approach these arguments. Yes, you're going to argue things in an exposition that somebody else will have argued before. Your essay will be very similar in terms of its argument if it's a general idea that most people would have. However, it's the way that you create that argument that will add to your creativity. In the same way, the detail, originality, creativity come heavily into the other 35 mark style questions, things like accounts and so on. And finally, secure and coherent structure. There's a sophistication in the shape and structure of the writing. That means you're not jumping all over the place. It has a coherent start, middle, and end. Don't try something increasingly edgy in an account writing piece, like jumping through flashbacks and so on. You're not writing your own film. You're not going to be the next novelist just from your story in the exam. However, it is important that you keep it secure and coherent so everyone will understand it. So don't try to do something very over the top and create some kind of multi-pronged narrative with a non-linear structure, because you'll confuse yourself and often you'll confuse the examiner. Okay, so let's look at accuracy. A wide range of ambitious and appropriate vocabulary. Experiment with words. Make sure you're looking over your ambitious vocabulary that you've done with your teacher and think about how you can put those into sentences. Your spelling matters, it definitely does. But if you need to experiment with words and you think you know how to spell something, use it, give it a go. Appropriate and effective variation of sentence structures. If your sentences are starting with the same thing over and over again, or they have the same structure of just being constant compound sentences or constant simple sentences, or even if it's constant complex sentences, that is still not a variation. You need to use all three of them all the time. Virtually all sentence construction is controlled and accurate. So this is where your sentences are put together coherently and they make sense. You need to make sure that they are always controlled and your grammar doesn't slip. And it says there, virtually all. That means there is room for error. Okay, you can make mistakes to get in and still get into band 5. You just can't make many. A range of punctuation is used confidently and accurately. In class, you would have used a range of punctuation. Don't be afraid to chuck things in like exclamation marks, question marks, and so on where they're relevant. But if you've been taught it, you can talk about semicolons, colons, and dashes, and so on. Those are very easy to squeeze in, especially semicolons if you know some simple tricks for it, the same as colons. Use them and use them confidently. Try your best to include them. Virtually all spelling, including that of complex irregular words, is correct. Now, they will drop you marks if you constantly spell things incorrectly. There's no way around that. But it says there virtually all. You can make 1 or 2 errors and still get into band 5. Control over tense and agreement is totally secure, and very secure command of grammar are basically the same kind of thing. Make sure you're not messing with your tenses. Make sure you stick to the correct grammatical structure with all of your sentences. And the best way to check that is to proofread it at the end. So what have we learned from this? 1, use techniques as often as possible without forcing them. That includes similes, metaphors, personification, etc. Use ambitious vocabulary and advanced punctuation wherever you can. Vary your sentence starters. Remember your timing and proofread. Timing is so important on this exam. Do not just give yourself 20 minutes on this writing piece. You need to be writing 2.5, maybe 3 pages in the time limit you're given. It's a lot of writing and you will feel like you're writing a lot, but just keep in mind 35 marks requires that level of writing. And as I said, proofread. You can catch mistakes. Okay. So I'm hoping you enjoyed that video, and I'm hoping that it's going to be useful for you when you attempt your exam on Monday. I have absolute faith in you. You will absolutely smash it.